So it's happened. Previews for Star Wars Outlaws have dropped. Now, I apologize. I had to be so coy for so long about this. I played Star Wars Outlaws back at Summer Game Fest in June. Then a handful of weeks later, I got to play more of it, like a full 4 hours. And we were under NDA and everything, so you can't talk about it. They needed time to prep everything else, and they said, yeah, we're going to go, and embargo will lift at the end of July. So I was like, cool. So time's passed. It's been a while. Like, honestly, it's whatever. It's been like a full month since I played it. So it's a little bit faded in my memory because it's been a month, but I took lots of notes. I still have my gameplay footage that I can't show you unedited. At least that's my understanding of it. But this is a clip or a series of edited clips from VGC. I also put up a video on the main channel going through it and expressing my thoughts. All told, I think the game is like really solid. There's a couple of things I didn't like, just full stop. I just didn't like it. Such as there's periods of platforming where things just don't work, where you need to jump from this platform to that platform and she just doesn't grab on quite right. It's just really clunky. I didn't like it. Every time I had to do that in a game or in a segment in the game, I disconnected. I was like, okay, I really don't like that. Other things that they did though really surprised me. This whole thing that you see on screen now, these like basically horse racing, but in the universe of Star Wars. And what you can actually do is before the race starts, you can place a bet. The bets are informed by information about each of the alien horse things, by the jockeys, who owns them, their previous records and behaviors. They cut it out of this clip here for whatever reason. But basically you can be like, I want to pick the creature with the blue rider. I think he's going to win. And you could choose that because he's won the last 3 races. You could choose that because he hasn't won any of the last 3 races. You could choose that because he has high energy, high excitement. You could choose that. They have all these stats listed out. And what I was told by my demoist is there is actually basically a way to figure out which will win. And what he said was, obviously, this is Star Wars Outlaws. There's some corruption involved with this stuff. And he said, while you're out exploring the world, keep your ears open because you might actually hear people out in the open world discussing the races and maybe describing how one of the creatures is going to throw the next 5 races or whatever because they gambled against themselves, you know? All sorts of really cool things. I can't think of another time something has happened, but that's really cool. The idea that they tie all of these things together. I thought that was really, really neat. So there's a bunch of stuff like that. Furthermore, there's also I forget the name of it, but there's also the card game you can play. And that card game, you can actually have Nyx go under the table, cheat by sticking her head up and looking at the cards the opponents have in their hands and stuff. There's all sorts of little stuff like that, which I appreciate. Yeah, I like that. Sasha, yeah, it's proven. Skillup shows how in his video. He found a data pad with the data. Oh, baby. Well, see, there you go. So there's lots of ways that this can tie in, and there's all sorts of kind of novel ideas that are implemented here that I haven't seen, honestly, in many Ubisoft games like this. Normally it's just pretty placid and it's just same old, but they seem to actually be doing something or a handful of things quite differently here. What I will say is graphically, I thought the game looked and ran really well. When we saw the gameplay that dropped from IGN, the 10-minute gameplay that dropped from IGN like a week or 2 ago, I think we were all kind of like stunned because some people were like, oh wow, those explosions look really bad or this or that. Honestly, I didn't have any problems like that in my gameplay. There was one part of the game, basically a little side quest that they had marked as bugged in this build, but they said it's already fixed in the current build. The build we're playing today, you can't complete that side quest. But other than that, everything worked really, really well. I didn't really have any problems, except I will say, for the love of God, I don't know why this is still an issue. Fall damage. I just had flashbacks watching Kay like go up to that little rock cliff face because I did something like this in my gameplay time. I don't think I mentioned this in the video, but it's a ledge like that high. And I was just trying to look down at the people that were beneath me, but I accidentally stepped off and she falls like 10, 15 feet dies, and then I respawn like all the way over there. Little bitty thing, but dude, it drove me crazy. It happened like once in my whole 4-hour session, but it was enough that it triggered the crap out of me. Anyways, I think in general the game looks really, really good. You can also see that the foliage density is crazy high and all very, very fluid. It's very Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, where everything moves with the wind. Nothing is really statically just sitting still. And you don't realize how many games keep all the foliage sitting perfectly still until you look back at the footage now. Like, this is just done really, really well, where everything is dynamic. A lot of games that are open world don't do that. A lot of games that are open world might have grass that just sort of generically sways in the wind, but it's not blowing with actual gusts of wind with the trees and everything else. Now, in terms of actual like core gameplay, there's stuff like this where you'll come across, you know, little encampments in the open world, and then you can clear them out either stealthily, or you can just go in blasters blazing. Honestly, the stealth worked just fine. There were multiple times where I thought that the AI should have reacted better. So for example, if you take right here, if you knock this guard out and he drops down in the grass right there, not heavy enough grass or tall enough grass for him to be hidden. I did that multiple times and I was like, okay, they're going to spot the body and I'm going to be screwed. And this was specifically during missions where like you're clearing your way through an encampment. And I didn't ever have any of the guards notice an incapacitated guard. Now, it's possible that I was just moving through the levels fast enough that it didn't ever really trigger anything. But there were multiple times where they definitely should have noticed the body and it should have come up, but it didn't. And so I don't know if that was just the levels and missions I was playing specifically, but again, that is something I noticed. So I hope that that is something that can be addressed. In this case, it looks like she pulled him into the grass. I will say, I don't think there's any mechanic. Maybe it's a later skill you can unlock, but I don't think there's a mechanic, at least early in the game, to drag bodies that have been incapacitated into cover, which was a bit of a bummer because there's a lot of stealth missions. But maybe, again, that's something that you get later in the game. You can see here, she's using Nyx to distract the guy. Then she's going to run up and take him out. Booyah. Nyx is going to help. I will just say this is a game, FSR2, the upscaling is going to suck ass. It's going to suck ass. I'm just saying, with the dense foliage and all this, all these really fine lines, it's going to struggle bus so hard. You're already seeing some artifacts of it here, but this is something where like even DLSS is probably going to struggle a little bit. These AI upscalers are going to be fighting for their lives. So hopefully it runs pretty well natively too. You can just avoid doing that because AI upscalers really struggle with dense grass with all those really fine lines. And this game has a lot of that with the dense grass. Now beyond that, you see that she gets some materials that are used for upgrading and crafting and stuff. She's going to keep running through levels and just broadly exploring. Honestly, I thought that the worlds itself were really well put together. They felt real enough. It didn't feel like very video gamified or anything. It's funny she's going in here and clearing out this encampment because when I played the demo, I was friendly with these guys, the Pikes, and so I didn't fight them. Like, this was friendly territory for me. So I just got to come in, talk with those guys. There were no real issues, at least as far as I recall. So, you know, the faction system is very, very robust. It's not really clear if they just have carbon copies of each quest for each of the factions. So for example, like there's this base where you need to go in there and collect this item. But if you're friendly with them, you just walk in and get it. But if you're angry or if you are aggroed against them, then you can't just walk in, you have to fight your way through. I don't know if it's like that or if it's like, yes, now you have to go get it from whichever faction you are angry with or who's angry with you. And there will always be one, and you have to fight your way through no matter what. There's no like peaceful option. I'm not really sure. So we'll see. As for space flight, very like much less simulator. It's not like a Starfield where you're having to manage fuel distribution and stuff like that. It's fine. But we also, again, we're playing like starter ship. So no real upgrades, nothing. We were playing the very beginning. And I think a lot of people might look at some of the gameplay we're seeing in these previews and be like, oh, wow, it looks really simple. We're playing the opening hours of the game. So we have like no real upgrades. We have no real abilities unlocked. So that's to be expected. It would be unfair to look at like the first 20 minutes of Elden Ring and be like, wow, so all the bosses you can only fight with like a basic weapon. That's lame. This armor sucks. It doesn't actually follow through from there. I think it's important to keep a perspective on that. Let's see. Thank you, Oliver, by the way, for the super chat. Hey, Luke, watch your video on Outlaws. And to me, it seems like there's basically now a trend on YouTube. If a game isn't immediately revolutionary or 9 out of 10, it's basically shit. Thoughts? I agree. People in general have that approach. I think, honestly, last year just spoiled the crap out of people. Now people are like, so it's not a Baldur's Gate 3. Okay, trash. And it's like, no, a game can be an 8 out of 10 and still be really, really good and worth checking out. It just means it has a couple of problems, but it can still absolutely be fun and a good time. Even something like Jedi Survivor in the same realm of Star Wars. Really good game, plagued by technical issues, especially at launch. So it probably lands at like an 8 out of 10 for a lot of like reviewers. If it were fixed and ran great, it's probably a 9 out of 10. But when you take everything together with its performance and the quality of the game, everything else, it probably ends up at like 8.5. It's still worth playing. But people look at it and they're like, wow, 8. Okay, wow, they've fallen off. It's like, no, that's a good score. And like 9s are supposed to be for like the runner-up to game of the year, like really, really freaking good. And then 10 is supposed to be masterpiece level. 10 is supposed to be like once every 5 years we get a masterpiece. You shouldn't probably expect to be getting more than 10 out of 10 every 4 years or so. Like it's supposed to be pretty exceptional. It's supposed to be. But anyway, with all this stuff, going back to Star Wars, they, I think, have done a pretty good job with a lot of this. The combat, I'm still not totally sold on just because it's pretty straightforward. To be fair, I did play through this mission and these levels and the snow levels. I've played through those sections twice now. So I played through them at Summer Game Fest and as part of this preview demo thing. And so I've tested different routes and both were quite linear. I mean, you can go up the left side of the stairs or the right side of the stairs. You can clear out these enemies in this way or that way, but either way, they're getting cleared out. There's not a whole lot of variability, but it's also a vertical slice of a single mission. So it's not necessarily a given that, you'll know exactly how the final product will come together. I will say I do like their mini games for unlocking doors and breaking codes and stuff. I think they're just fun. I really, really enjoy them. You see now it's going to open that up. She's going to go break her way in, steal the artifact, and then run off. And I think, yeah, you see what I mean? Sometimes the stealth is like a little clunky, but Nyx can help with that. Honestly, after playing all of this, I'm pretty excited for Outlaws. I think it's got a lot of potential. It's not a perfect game. There's some clunk here and there that is pretty evident. But it looks like it's going to be a good game from what I've played. It looks like a good game. Amazing masterpiece. I don't personally expect it to be a masterpiece or amazing, but I think it'll be good. I think it'll be a good romp in the Star Wars hay, and we'll see kind of how it scales up and how things shift and change later in the game as you level up your ship and as the fights get bigger and better. But like even this, you remember the gameplay that dropped from IGN 10 that was 10 minutes long? You fought one of these robots in those levels. And when they were taking shots, there were like no post-processing effects or anything when they were getting hit. When they, like, you see now he broke, part of it, his leg falls off, and then there's sparks flying off and this blue little charge flying up in the air. And then he ragdolls. None of that was in that footage. He just like fell apart and fell down like a PS2 game. And so I just have to wonder what was going on with that footage. Hopefully that's not what the final product looks like, and it's not a case of like downgrading. And hopefully that was just like a Series S kind of really, really whittled down in performance port. Still not what you'd hope to see for a game that's coming to current gen consoles, but that's also what you get when you release a console that's basically just the last gen console, but it's white now. Because that's just how that goes. But you'll see here, like, you fight through these guys behind some basic cover. This is kind of what I mean when I say I'm not totally sold on the combat yet. because there's not a whole lot of complex behaviors here. They just kind of stand there and they shoot at you. When you're playing it, it feels fine. You're like moving fast enough that you're not thinking too much about it, but they just kind of stand there shooting at you. Even that guy, he could move over behind the pillar for cover, and he just stands there in the open and lets you shoot him. So I'm hoping that maybe that's just a difficulty option thing where they had the AI turned down real stupid. Maybe that scales on higher difficulties. I'm not sure, but this is going to be one of those games I'm going to play on a harder difficulty just because I think on the lower difficulties, the AI is overly forgiving in my humble opinion. Yeah, I mean, there's some really good attention to detail. For example, like Kay gets all of this snow on her coat when she's out in the snowy levels and stuff. And then when she walks inside, let's see if it actually happens in real time. She walks inside and watch the snow on her coat as she comes under the heated lights. It's going to melt. There it's like half melted. It's melting a little bit more. And there it's like fully melted. So they have little things like the snow actively changing whether you're outside or inside. The weather actually affects the outfits and all that. It's well done. As for the mocap and stuff, it seems fine enough. I will say, at least in the segment I played, again, it's a vertical slice, so I don't know if I was missing something that maybe in the full game that makes it make sense. But there were a couple of moments in the story that I experienced where I was like, it seems a little bit like they're just, don't worry about it. You know, it's kind of a cavalier attitude towards the writing, where like in this case, she stole this, which had been stolen from them. And her whole thing was that she was going to give them this so she could get somebody out of their jail and they could use them to like help them find what they need to find or level up their ship or whatever it is. So they stole this back from somebody that had stolen it. My immediate impression would be, okay, if I were these like almighty space overlords, I would think this thing was stolen and then you just came and handed it to me asking for something in exchange. That to me would suggest that maybe she's the one that stole it to begin with. They have a couple of lines of dialogue where they're like, well, we thought it was this group that stole it, but they don't say conclusively like what it was or wasn't, but they just kind of go, okay, thanks, bye. Yeah, we'll give you what you want. And I'm like, okay, I think there would have been a little more resistance. I think there would have been a little more pushback, but okay. You know, but again, there might be pieces of dialogue or something I didn't get to see or that I missed that could explain why they were so willing to just do this. Or maybe there's going to be a big double cross where they take this, they let the bomb maker out, and I don't know, maybe they double cross you again and then they throw you in jail because they think you actually did steal it. I don't know. I think there's probably something I'm not seeing, but there were some things like that where I was like, okay, that seems mighty convenient that we're just going along with it. But you can see right as you finish a mission, you get the reflection of the reputational influence on Crimson Dawn and Ashiga. And this happens pretty much every quest. Everything you do impacts your reputation with different clans. And I eat that up. I think it's really cool. And just in the segments of gameplay we experienced, there were certain shops, for example, that had items locked behind certain reputational levels. So if you had a good relationship with them, you could get access to this really powerful upgrade for your blaster. But if you had a bad relationship with them, they just wouldn't sell anything to you. So there's a lot of cool little stuff like that where I imagine certain playstyles will be empowered by siding with certain factions and not with others. It's just going to be a matter of figuring out how you want to approach it. Beyond there, let's see, more slap you. I slap you. Do they have the shot? I don't think they do in this gameplay. But there is a moment in the demo where we straight up are like, we're in our on one planet, we hop in our ship, we take off, go into space, fly to an Imperial space station, dock in the hangar, which I think is this same hangar if it's the mission I'm thinking of, and we land, and then we do a whole mission inside the Imperial spaceship, and then we race back out, sneak back onto our ship, not really sneaking, but get back on our ship and leave. And it was really cool. Like super fluid, no load screens. You just are on the planet. You hop in your ship, you fly up to a space station, go inside, hang out, kill some people, find the thing you need to find, and then you get back in your ship and you fly back down to the planet's surface. super fluid, pretty damn cool. And I hope that there's a lot more stuff like that. And it's not just, you know, a couple of little instances here and there. Now, with all of this said, there still are lots of questions. There's questions like with the combat, with the AI. There's questions with the open world design, how that's going to work. I've seen some people compare it to Red Dead Redemption, for example. I'm not sold on that comparison, but I think that there's still a lot of question marks around the game, and especially things that they've tried to push, like the fact that this is the first open world Star Wars game. You know, I still don't know exactly how that will work because everything we've played has been pretty linear. But what I will say is after playing it, I'm more excited and interested in this than I am for like Assassin's Creed Shadows. I'm very interested in what they pull off here. And after playing it myself, I was like, okay, I think you guys actually are onto something. This does not feel like, honestly, it does not feel like a Ubisoft game. It does not feel like anything they've done before in a very good way. It feels like they've actually tried to do something different. And little anecdotal thing, when we were at one of the preview events, there were some of the devs there. And I won't name anybody, of course, but there were some devs who had worked on Avatar and had then, after Avatar's launch, moved over to help finish up Star Wars Outlaws. And let me just tell you, all those people, I heard from at least two of them comments basically to the effect of, we couldn't wait to get over here and start working on Star Wars. I think this is where like the real passion for Massive lied, or lay, whatever. I think this is where they were really excited and where they poured a lot of their passion and creativity into. And I think Avatar, they did their best, but I think working with them on with whatever Lightstorm was more difficult than they expected. With all that said, my prediction for something like Star Wars Outlaws, with all this work that they've done on it, I think it's probably landing in like that 8 out of 10 range. For some people, though, I expect it to be higher. I think if you're like a hardcore Star Wars fan, there might even be some people that are putting this in like 8.5 to 9, just because it seems to be a really faithful representation of that era. And I fully expect that they're going to be doing stuff like having, you know, Darth Vader show up at a random point. I haven't seen anything about that, but I mean, come on, it's pretty likely they do something like that. I think there might even be a moment where you see something like Luke in the distance, you know. I think that that's pretty likely. So I think it's one to keep an eye on, but after playing the game, I'm more interested and I'm more excited for it than I was before, which is exactly what you'd hope. He took my thing.